Picture this. You're sitting alone. Not the kind of alone where your roommate is in the next room or your phone is buzzing on the table. Real alone. The sun dropped 2 hours ago, and there is nothing between you and the darkness except a fire that keeps shrinking. No roads, no voices, no distant hum of traffic. Just wind moving through grass, the occasional crack of something shifting in the tree line, and your own breathing, which somehow sounds louder than it should. It's 40,000 years ago. You are, by every biological measure, the same creature sitting there reading this right now. Same brain, same nervous system, same basic emotional wiring. And somewhere in the quiet, something is happening inside you that science is only beginning to take seriously. What did that feel like? Not the cold, not the hunger, not the physical danger, which was real and constant and everywhere. We're talking about the feeling underneath all of that. The specific, strange weight of being alone with your own mind when there is absolutely nothing to distract you from it. No content, no notifications, no ambient noise of other human lives happening nearby. Just you, and whatever lived inside your head when the fire got low. Here's what's wild. For most of the 20th century, scientists didn't really ask this question. They studied ancient humans the way you'd study rocks, cataloging tools, measuring skulls, mapping migration routes. The inner life of a Paleolithic person was considered basically unknowable, and therefore not worth serious inquiry. You can't carbon date a feeling. But that started to change. Researchers began looking at the evidence differently. Cave paintings made in total darkness, deep in tunnels no one lived in. Burial sites with flowers and ochre and careful arrangement of the dead. Objects that served no practical purpose but were carried thousands of miles anyway. What these things pointed to wasn't just behavior. They pointed to an inner world that was far more complex, far more recognizable, and far more human than anyone had been willing to admit. And at the center of all of it was a question that turns out to be surprisingly difficult to answer. What happens to a human being, neurologically, emotionally, at the level of basic survival wiring, when they are completely alone? The answer is not what you'd expect. And it starts with the fact that for most of human history, being alone wasn't just uncomfortable, it was indistinguishable from a death sentence. Let's start with the brain, because the brain is where this gets uncomfortable fast. When a modern human experiences social isolation, something measurable happens in the nervous system. The same neural circuits that process physical pain light up. Not similar circuits, not adjacent ones, the same ones. A 2003 study out of UCLA put people in a brain scanner and had them play a simple video game where they were gradually excluded from participation by the other players. The social rejection, a completely trivial one in a completely artificial setting, activated the anterior cingulate cortex, the exact same region that fires when you break your arm. Your brain does not distinguish between being left out and being physically hurt. It processes both as damage. Now take that finding and walk it back 40,000 years. An ancient human living in a small band of maybe 20 to 50 people didn't just prefer company, they required it, the way they required food and water. Everything that kept you alive. Hunting large animals, defending territory, raising children past infancy, surviving a bad winter. Every single one of those things required other people. You could not do them alone. Full stop. A lone human on the Pleistocene landscape was not an independent agent. They were a problem waiting to become a tragedy. So the brain adapted accordingly. It built an alarm system. And that alarm system was loneliness. This is what researchers like John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying the neuroscience of social isolation, argued and documented with remarkable consistency. Loneliness isn't a mood. It isn't a personality trait. It isn't weakness. It is a biological signal, as ancient and as functional as thirst, telling the organism that something critical is wrong and needs to be corrected immediately. When you feel lonely, your nervous system is not being dramatic. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is screaming at you to get back to the group before something kills you. The chronic stress response that accompanies isolation, elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, heightened threat detection, inflammatory markers climbing across the body, All of it makes perfect sense when you understand what being alone actually meant for most of human evolutionary history. It meant exposure. It meant vulnerability. It meant that every sound in the dark was probably something that was going to eat you. The ancient human sitting alone by that shrinking fire wasn't experiencing loneliness the way we experience a bad weekend. They were experiencing a full body alarm going off in every system simultaneously. Heart rate up, senses sharpened, mind scanning, searching, cycling through the same loop over and over. Where is everyone? Why am I here? How do I get back? That loop is still running in you right now. It just has different triggers. Here is something that should stop you cold. Deep in the cave system of Lascaux in southern France, roughly 300 feet from the entrance, past the point where any natural light reaches, where the darkness is so complete it has physical weight, someone painted a rhinoceros, then a wounded man, then a bison. 17,000 years ago, a human being crawled into the absolute dark, alone or nearly so, with a lamp made of animal fat, and made something beautiful where almost no one would ever see it. Not near the entrance, not somewhere practical. Deep in the part of the cave that required effort, that required commitment, that required choosing to go further into the dark than any reasonable survival instinct would suggest. Why? Archaeologists have debated this for over a century, and the honest answer is we don't fully know. But one interpretation that keeps gaining traction is both simple and quietly devastating. The paintings weren't primarily meant to be seen by other people. They were meant to be made. The act itself was the point. A human, alone in total darkness, surrounded by silence so deep you can hear your own pulse, reaching out in the only direction available, upward, outward, into whatever was listening. That is not so different from what you do at 2 a.m. when something is sitting heavy on your chest and you open a notes app and start typing to no one. The ochre handprints are even more direct. Across dozens of sites on multiple continents, ancient humans pressed their hands against stone and blew pigment around them, leaving a negative space in the shape of a human hand. I was here. This is the shape of me. Someone see this. Paleoanthropologist Ian Tattersall has written about how the explosion of symbolic behavior in the archaeological record, the art, the burial practices, the objects carried far beyond any practical use, all of it appearing within roughly the same window of time, suggests something fundamental shifting in the human mind. Not just smarter, different. Capable of interior experience complex enough to need expression. Capable of the specific ache of feeling unseen. The cave walls weren't galleries. They were the closest thing those people had to a message sent into the void, into the future, into whatever existed beyond the firelight and the darkness and the terrifying quiet of being alone with a mind that had learned, just recently in evolutionary terms, to ask questions it had absolutely no way of answering. They were reaching. Across time, across silence, across everything. And somehow, impossibly, they reached you. But here's the twist that changes everything. Some of them chose it. Not by accident, not out of desperation, not because the group abandoned them or the hunt went wrong and they got separated in the dark. Some ancient humans walked away from the fire deliberately, alone, into the wilderness and stayed there, on purpose, for days, sometimes weeks. And when they came back, the group treated them differently. Not with pity, not with concern, with something closer to reverence. Every documented hunter-gatherer culture anthropologists have studied, without exception, has some version of this practice. A person, usually young, usually at a threshold moment in their life, is sent out alone or goes voluntarily. No food, minimal shelter, no company. Just themselves and whatever the silence decides to show them. The vision quest of the Plains tribes. The walkabout of Aboriginal Australians. The solo initiation rites documented across cultures in Africa, Siberia, South America. Different names, different rituals surrounding them, same fundamental architecture. You go alone into the hard place. You stay until something happens. You come back changed. The anthropological consensus is that these weren't punishments or arbitrary traditions. They were technologies, deliberate, refined over generations, designed to produce a specific outcome in the human nervous system. Here is what actually happens when you remove all social input from a brain that is wired to process social input constantly. At first, the alarm system fires hard. The loneliness signal, the threat response, the cycling loop of where is everyone, all of it spikes. The first day or two of true isolation is reportedly among the most psychologically uncomfortable experiences a human being can have. Your mind turns on itself. It generates noise to fill the silence. It people populates the empty space with voices, faces, fears. And then, if you stay with it, something shifts. Researchers studying modern sensory deprivation and solo wilderness experiences document a remarkably consistent pattern. After the initial crisis period, a different state emerges. Threat response drops. The internal noise quiets. Perception sharpens in ways that are difficult to describe and nearly impossible to achieve any other way. Some subjects report a dissolution of boundary between self and environment. Others describe a clarity about their own values, fears, and purpose that felt inaccessible in ordinary social life. The shaman who came back from the wilderness wasn't performing mystery. They had been somewhere neurologically real. Somewhere, the noise stopped. Ancient humans didn't just endure loneliness. Some of them learned to use it. They walked into the silence not to escape the fire, but to find something the fire's light was too bright to see. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. You have done this. Recently. Probably more than once this week. You have been in a room full of people and felt completely, inexplicably alone. You have picked up your phone at 1 a.m, not because you needed anything specific, but because the silence had a weight to it that you needed to push back against. You have typed something into a search bar, or a notes app, or a text thread that you never sent, just to feel like the thought existed somewhere outside your own skull. That is the handprint on the cave wall. Exactly that. The technology changed. The feeling did not move 1 inch. This is what makes the loneliness research so quietly staggering when you sit with it. We tend to think of ancient humans as simpler, more animal, less interior, less burdened by the particular modern torture of self-awareness. But the evidence doesn't support that. The same brain that is keeping you up tonight was keeping someone up in a cave in southern France 17,000 years ago. Same architecture, same alarm systems, same desperate need to feel that somewhere, somehow, something registered your existence. John Cacioppo, before he died in 2018, spent the last years of his research career arguing that loneliness had become a public health crisis in the modern world. Rates climbing, average number of close confidants dropping, people reporting fewer and fewer people they could call in a genuine emergency. And here is the dark irony sitting at the center of all of it. We are the most connected human beings who have ever lived, by every measurable external standard, and among the loneliest in recorded history by nearly every internal one. The ancient human had an excuse. The darkness was real. The distance between fires was measured in days of walking. The silence was total and unavoidable, and came with genuine predators in it. What is our excuse? Maybe that is the wrong question. Maybe loneliness was never a problem to be solved. Maybe it was always just the signal, the alarm, the biological reminder that connection is not optional, that we are a social species down to our neurons, that the thing you feel when the room empties and the night gets long is not weakness or dysfunction or something to be medicated or scrolled away. Maybe it is just your brain doing what brains have always done, noticing the fire is getting low, listening for the group, reaching toward whatever might be out there in the dark. 40,000 years later, still reaching, still human, still waiting for someone to reach back.